We are very fortunate to have our panel of local experts to join with our external speakers to talk about how we can be more bikeable and walkable here at Lake Tahoe. So let me start on the end with Steve Teshara. I've known Steve for almost 20 years now. And Steve is a local transportation aficionado, among many other things. And we're just delighted that he can be here on the panel. He's with Sustainable Community Advocates. He sits on the Advisory Planning Commission for TRPA, sits on the Tahoe Transportation District, among about, what, 20 other boards, I think it may be, more or less.
We're here in your service.
Yes, he is. In fact, that's his email tag, yours in service. So we appreciate his service to the community and for being with us tonight. To his right is B. Gorman, the CEO of the Tahoe Chamber, tahochamber.org, and B has been in that position for what, 6 years, thereabouts. B is a local community leader. She also serves on many, many boards, has really had a great vision for our community and for bringing small business and developing resources to help our small business community here in Tahoe. Very forward thinker, and we're happy to have her here on the panel tonight. Next to her is Brenden Ferry. Brian is with El Dorado County. Brenden, not Brian. Thank you. I know who you are. For 10 years. Oh, geez Louise. I'm going a little too fast. That's right. After 10 years, I can get your name wrong, right? I'm sorry. Brenden, thank you. Brenden, actually, I don't know if you let the cat out of the bag, but Brenden used to work at TRPA, so he has a water quality background. Brenden ran our erosion control stormwater team, and we worked together on many projects. And Brendan's also very involved in the community and has a lovely wife, Molly. I didn't get her name wrong, who are local residents here in South Lake Tahoe. And Brenden is a local bike and pedestrian trail expert. So he'll be telling you a little bit about what the county's doing in terms of bike trails and some of the other recreation projects that are going on. So thanks for joining us. And next to Brenden, we have Sarah Hussong-Johnson with the City of South Lake Tahoe. The city, of course, is a major partner of TRPA's. All of us are here on the panel. We work together on everything from our environmental improvement program, stormwater projects, transportation, environmental threshold attainment projects on many, many fronts, and we're delighted that she could participate with us tonight from the city. Miles, you know, we have Marlo Tinney with Caltrans right here, and Caltrans has our state highway, and of course everyone's very interested in the work that's going on this year on Highway 50 from Denny's up to Ski Run Boulevard. There's work going on all around the lake that Caltrans is involved in, and Caltrans is a key partner for Tahoe in the environmental improvement program as well, because we said what happens on the land affects the lake. And every road project that you see that's going on that Caltrans is working on also contains water quality features where we actually treat runoff that comes off the highway before it enters Lake Tahoe. So not only is it a road improvement project, but it's a water quality project, and it's also helping our walkability with better sidewalks and bike lanes. So we're very happy to have her on our panel tonight, and Michael is here as well. So we're going to start with one question, and I think we'll pose it actually to our external speakers first, and then our local community members can jump in shortly thereafter. But the first question is, how can you balance the immense traffic flow on Highway 50 and all the congestion and pollution it creates with an environmentally conscious city that wants more biking and walking paths? Michael, do you want to take a stab at that first?
That was an easy one. Well, first of all, I love statistics, but on average, and maybe Caltrans can bear this out, when a highway runs through a city, about 85% of that traffic is not through traffic. It is local traffic. And when I say local, I don't mean necessarily people who live here, but people who are residing here temporarily, going up and down that highway, running errands. So when you're talking about massive traffic volumes, it is not people going through your town. It is people, like I said, just doing these types of daily trips. It's a rough figure, 85%. So when you're talking about those really big traffic volumes, you have incredible opportunities to divert some of that traffic, and I don't mean by creating a bypass or something like that, to other means of getting around. A lot of the tactics that I gave you tonight, like better and smarter land use, so you don't have to hop in a car and get up and down the highway, more connectivity, make it more attractive for bicycling and walking, create destinations so you don't necessarily have to get as far. Remember what I said, access is more important than mobility, because we we found, when I've worked for the Oregon DOT, we found this out over and over again. It's very typical for a state highway in the rural sections to carry between 5,000 and 7,000 vehicles a day, and for that number to inflate to 30, 35,000 when it went through a city. So again, that 85% number. So it's a local issue. Work on local solutions. Don't think that because it's a state highway, Caltrans is going to carry all the burden of solving that problem, because it is a problem that is created at the local level with bad land use decisions, bad connectivity. So it really is something that the locals have to work with Caltrans on to come up with local solutions, because it cannot be a highway solution.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that? Miles, did you have anything to add, or
Well,
Caltrans? Okay.
I'll let you add to it, but I don't have much to add to it, but you know, I've always learned if you can't add to the solution, don't add to the problem. So I'm going to leave tomorrow and take my car off the road.
I'll just kind of echo what's been said, is it really is a collaboration, and agencies need to be working together, and you can look at technical details like where people are going and where they're coming from, but ultimately it's about giving people choices and information, whether it's local residents or visitors, so they know the options that are out there, or they know how to get from point A to point B.
Okay, great. Actually, I'll hold this. I'm going to go to the next question because it ties in exactly to this one, and that is about options. And what sort of options do we have for people right now other than getting in their car and going from point A to point B? We're getting there. We're doing really well in terms of realizing our vision for a bikeable community. So I'm going to go to Brenden and ask him to talk a little bit about some of the trail work that he has going on, and then maybe, Sari, you can talk about some of the trail work in the city.
I can talk from, I'm an environmental planner with El Dorado County. The county, you know, obviously, I think most people know here that the city is its own incorporated entity. El Dorado County is the unincorporated areas. Out in Myers is our main community here at the lake, but we do run communities all the way up to Tahoma, and we're very spread out, you know. Density is not something that we're really going to achieve with our existing land use kind of designs. We do want to kind of increase density in Myers and really redevelop that urban core there along with Caltrans, who's going to be a critical player in that. But our goal really here on the South Shore is to connect Myers to the Y here in South Lake Tahoe on a Class 1 bicycle facility system so that users of all various types can get back and forth and commute for work, for shopping, for errands, to recreate, to just get out and enjoy the beautiful scenery that we have out there here at the lake. The weather is so good in Lake Tahoe. I'm an avid bicyclist myself. I ride my bike to work almost every day, and I love it. I love that about living in Tahoe, and I want to, you know, promote that energy to our other folks who live in this community. I think we have a great opportunity to do that here. And so we've already built 2 bike path networks. Well, we have one existing facility out in Myers. It's called the Pat Lowe Trail. It's a Class 1 trail, and a Class 1 trail, for those folks who don't know, is a separated bicycle path or multi-user path. It's a minimum of 8 feet wide. It's a bi-directional trail, so folks can move in both directions. There's actually a Class 1 facility on both sides of the highway out there in Myers. It's in a little bit of disrepair, I will admit, and we do have plans and money, actually, thanks to Measure R, to do some work out there in Myers. And we're trying to time that with some of the community planning processes that Norma is spearheading with others out there. But the Pat Lowe Trail, Pat Lowe Path, connects with our Sawmill 1A and Sawmill 1B bicycle paths. Those bring you all the way down to the bridge along the golf course there, and you see the large steel truss bridge that goes over the Upper Truckee River. It's about a 280-foot span. We built that 2 years ago. That stops at Sawmill Road. The county owns Sawmill Road, although we do not have a dedicated right-of-way along it, which is creating some problems, but that's kind of another story. We are then going to build a Class 1 facility down Sawmill Road all the way to Lake Tahoe Boulevard, and then from Lake Tahoe Boulevard we want to build a bicycle path all the way into the city limits at the Y. Some of you may have participated in some of those public meetings we had about Lake Tahoe Boulevard. Got pretty fired up. There was definitely about 150 people in the room late at night out at the airport. We had a very lively discussion. We kind of arrived at a preferred alternative that was somewhat in the middle. It's impossible to be in the middle of a space that you don't even know what space you're in. There was people all over the map wanting different things, and it was a good community process. But we do have a preferred alternative. We do have some funding for that project. We have about a 50% design there. We're in NEPA process with Caltrans to get our environmental clearances. So we have built paths, we have future paths planned, and that will connect Myers all the way into the Y. And I think it's going to blow people away when it's done. It's going to be really fantastic facilities.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Sarah, do you want to talk about the city? Thank you, Brenden.
Certainly. Yeah, I think similar to Brenden, the city's goal here is that we continue to expand upon our existing bicycle and pedestrian access that we have throughout the city. And if any of you are wondering what those facilities are, you can always reference back to the TRPA Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan that just show the mapped bike routes, both Class 2, which are on-road facilities shared with traffic, protected lanes, and then Class 1, which are separated from traffic. We actually have a number of projects going right now that I'm really excited about that I think will further our master planning here in bike and pedestrian transportation in the city. Just to give you a couple references of those and what the city is working on. Probably our largest ones that are in the hopper right now and actually slated for construction next year would be, we're looking to do the Class 1 bicycle connection from Lakeview Commons, Regan Beach, to the other side of the Harrison Avenue commercial district. We're planning that as part of our Harrison Avenue improvement project. We also have a sidewalk that we are currently in planning and preparing to go to construction. Both of these projects are funded for construction in 2013. A sidewalk in Pioneer Trail from Highway 50 there at State Line. I'm sure all of you have seen the kind of dangerous conditions we have out there, especially in the wintertime with a lot of folks walking in the roadway. We were able to pursue some transportation funding and are currently designing a sidewalk there. We have a rehab of our linear park improvement project going on right now. That's the sidewalk that basically extends from, it's a separated path. It extends from east of Ski Run Boulevard down into the commercial area in front of the Tahoe Meadows properties. We're rehabbing that trail. We're looking at putting in lighting. Right now it's kind of a questionably lit trail. We've had a lot of vandalism on the bollard lighting that was installed there about 10 years ago. And in the little longer range forecast, some of our more challenging but also equally exciting projects that we have going are the El Dorado Beach to Ski Run Boulevard Bike Trail project. That's going to tie in nicely with the segment of improvements that Caltrans is working on right now, essentially on the west from El Dorado Beach, a separated Class 1 bike path adjacent to the north side of the highway that ties in at Ski Run Boulevard. That project has been a long process, and I want to emphasize to the folks in this room that planning bicycle facilities takes a lot of patience. That's a classic example of where we need to acquire property to meet the requirements, the standards of design that allow the projects to be funded. So that's a long range, but we're in the acquisition process now. We're at 90% design. We've cleared our environmental clearance, so it's moving along.
Exciting.
So we're excited. We're excited. I think we have a lot of great projects in the hopper.
That's great, Sarah. Thank you. I'm going to pass it to, unless, did you have something to add? No. Marlo? Okay, Steve, Teshara. Funding has been coming up in virtually every conversation that we've had so far. Tahoe has had great benefits from federal and state and local funding. All of those funding sources are constrained. The economy is not the same as it was 10 years ago when we go out into the environmental improvement program, and we've been very successful in some of those funding opportunities. Steve works very hard for Tahoe. He goes back to Washington, D.C. with a group of us, a coalition of folks that make sure Tahoe is on front and center of our congressional delegations. So Steve, you want to talk a little bit about the funding picture and some of the work that you do?
That we do.
That we do.
I don't do anything. We do some.
Nice.
Julie's right. This is a story, if you're familiar with the little book, Who Moved My Cheese? Okay, so the cheese is not in the same place. And maybe it's true that there's not as much cheese or it's not coming in so many flavors, but there is money. You just have to go to the new place where the cheese is, where the money is. And right now, there's consolidation of federal programs in the new transportation bill in Washington that Congress just passed, that the president signed. And there are some challenges in there because things like federal money for bike trails and such is reduced. and states have more flexibility. So I think in California, we're going to be lucky that, California will continue to invest in bike trails. Other states, may decide to take it for other things. So right now we're in the process of finding out where the new cheese is, where the location. In California, yes, it's controversial. Everything's controversial. You just have to deal with that. But in California, there's a new source of revenue coming. It's from the AB 32, which is the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006. So cap and trade revenues, if you've heard that term in the news. And starting this fall, according to the current schedule, there's going to be auctions where companies, corporations, whatever, who generate pollution are going to essentially buy credits, and that will generate money. So right now we're in the process of positioning Lake Tahoe to get some of that money. Everybody says, well, it's all going to the bullet train, or it's all going here or going there. The reasonable people in California know that when you have a funding source of that magnitude, everybody in the state needs to benefit. So it can't just benefit one area, big cities, it's got to benefit rural areas. So we're positioning areas like Tahoe that are big on natural resources to be in a position to get some of that funding. And we're trying to do it here for a couple of things, including transportation, and including the ability to go in and buy some of our more dilapidated infrastructure that no longer serves a useful purpose, and basically say, okay, Tim, you got Tim's Motel, 50 units, it's the $39 a night, you don't want to really do that anymore, we're going to be able to do a deal with you where we take that, we either retire it, we use some of the units somewhere else, those kinds of things. And those are consistent with basically right now what's Assembly Bill 1532, which is going to lay the framework for how that money gets spent. So we're busy doing that. What's that? We don't take it, we buy it. We buy it. We do a deal with Tim, we get Tim's Motel, and we either retire it completely, we move some of the units around, we create open space. There was a lot of motels of that type that are between Ski Run and State Line, and those places are open space now. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing if people remember what we did with residential units through the Burton Santini program or the state of Nevada, state of California. So anyway, that's one of the things we're working on. And then, of course, on the transit side specifically, we're trying to address the fact that just this month, July, new fiscal year, Tahoe lost over $200,000 in state funding from the Transportation Development Act because our population went down about 10,000 people from 2000 to 2010, according to the census. So we've lost population. So that means our formula allocation of that money for transit is down. And so we're working to try to figure out how to address that. And so those are the kinds of things that we're going to. I just want to say one more thing about bike trails and specifically. And both Brenden and Sarah mentioned great projects that were going on here. I think some are familiar with, in my view, what's really going to be the spine of our system, and that's the South Shore Greenway. And that's, taking the old Caltrans freeway right-of-way that kind of bisected the community and basically turning it into a multi-use trail system. And back to Michael's point about neighborhood connectivity. One of the reasons we're all on Highway 50 going everywhere is because we can't get from neighborhood to neighborhood. We have to go out on the highway, then back into where we're going, then back on the highway, and that's just ridiculous. And so we're not going to achieve these goals of continuing to reduce VMT and doing the other things of making our community livable unless we can get through in our communities from neighborhood to neighborhood without having to come on the highway. So I'm very excited about the project. I know the Conservancy and many partners are working on trying to build the first segment of that, which is kind of from the Sierra Tract through the college area here and then down towards State Line, and that eventually will go all the way out to Myers. So it'll basically be a multi-use spine in our community connecting most of our neighborhoods, at least on the south side of Highway 50. Very, very exciting stuff. So I'm glad to be part of the team, and happy to talk to anybody about funding or anything offline.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Steve. While Ty, I have a bunch of questions here. If you can just hold that thought for me, that'd be great. While B has the mic, I want to ask you, B, what does this all mean to our local business community? I mean, what does a walkable, bikeable Tahoe mean to the chamber?
I think it means a lot to the local business community. And actually, I also want to go back to your first question, which was how might we balance the traffic on Highway 50 now? And I think this last week or two, we're really having a sense of what that feels like. Everybody noticed it's kind of back to the 5 year ago sort of volume again. But anybody have this experience where you come out and you're in one of those driveways that we maybe don't need, according to Michael, and you go, I need to go to the dry cleaners. which way is it again? And you sit there and you try to remember, are you going left or are you going right on Highway 50? And then you finish that errand, now you got to go somewhere else. That, I think, is the real opportunity for us, is to start to consolidate into some nodes those services that each of us needs every day and enable us to park our car once and walk and do those errands and support all of those businesses and stop and have a sandwich while you're there and stop and have a cup of coffee, and maybe we could have offices above, and maybe there could be some apartments that would be affordable housing above those. So I think that's how I wanted to address that first question in terms of how we might begin to alleviate some of the linear nature of our community. And then in terms of what does walkable mean and what does bicycle friendly mean, it means a more robust economy. I mean, there are studies after studies after studies that prove this point. Real estate is more valuable when people can walk and bike, about 25% more valuable in most communities. We have a baby boomer population. They're moving back into cities now. Why? Because they don't want that big house in the suburbs. They want to live somewhere where they can walk and meet their friends and have dinner, go to the theater, whatever it is. We can have that here. So these are the kinds of things that are the benefits, I think, to starting to think this way. Why do we travel? Why do we go to Europe? Why do we go to Napa? Why do we go to Sonoma? What do we do when we get there? We get out of our cars, we park them, we shop, we dine, we go to the library, we go to the museum, we go to whatever it is that's there. And guess what? We're worthy of having that here too. We just have to have the courage and the vision to start to think that way. So it means prosperity in a word. It means prosperity.
Excellent. Thanks, B. I'm going to go back to something that Michael said. Yeah, park once, walk often. And you just amplified that and what it really means to our whole community. And the next question is for Michael, so if we could pass the mic down here, and then anyone can feel free to jump in, but we'll start with you, Michael. The question is, what jurisdictions have a pedestrian level of service standard that you know of? And do you have any tips for engaging and partnering with conservation groups, environmental groups that might not agree with some of the ideas that you put on the table?
Right, yeah. So, trying to develop a better level of service for pedestrians is something that's been looked at for at least 15 years, because I know I started on this in 1997. And the problem is when you try to capture something that's really more qualitative than just can you move down the road, you start to look at how many factors influence the appeal of a walk. There's someone who's on the Congress in Urbanism who's come up with this fantastic term called walk appeal. A friend of mine wanted to use something more sexy, walk seductive even, but I kind of like the walk appeal. Is it appealing to walk? And intuitively, your gut just tells you whether or not you're going to enjoy walking down the road a lot. And B, I think what you said is absolutely fantastic. Americans are willing to spend thousands of dollars of their discretionary income to travel very far away just to be able to walk. Why can't you do that in your own neighborhood? But think about, I'm not going to ask you to do it as a show of hands, but just think in your head of a city that you love to go to and walk around. And then just think about what are the elements that make it so great for walking. And you will find out that the quality of the sidewalk racks actually really quite low on that. Like Paris actually has pretty crappy sidewalks, believe it or not. Rome has terrible sidewalks. It's all about the feel of what it is to be walking in that environment. It's what are the buildings, what are the facades, what are the windows, the trees, the benches, the artwork, the people, the window shopping. It's all these elements, and trying to capture that in some numerical way is very, very difficult. So the things that we are looking at that are a little bit easier for Department of Transportation to capture, of course, things like sidewalk conditions, the width of the sidewalk, but the ones that we're finding out that really do relate directly to transportation that can be measured is the ability to cross the road and the ability to get through intersections. And just like level of service measures delay at intersections primarily, is can the pedestrian make it through a really busy intersection, and can you cross the street safely? So I would say as important as all those other qualitative elements are, and as difficult as they are to capture, I think if you focus on the presence of a sidewalk, obviously, and the ability to cross the street and get through intersections, you'll be starting to make really big improvements and let people like B really articulate as well as she did the value of having destinations that are worth walking to.
Thanks. We have a question about transit, so I'm going to pass the microphone to Miles if we could. And Miles, the question is about, we have a city bus system, Blue Go, but the funding has been cut, as Steve Teshara mentioned earlier. Can you talk a little bit about how Park City has dealt with this? You gave some of your great statistics on transit. What are your tips for how we could improve our funding for public transit?
Well, again, I don't think there's any magic to it. It depends what your values are. If you think public transportation is a high enough value, we fund it through sales tax, and we have a couple of different sales taxes that fund it. And we also fund it through our general fund. So there's a number of funds, but we spend about $8 million a year on our transportation system, and we've combined it now with the county as well. We started as a city system. We've expanded it out into the county, and so they fund some too. We just built a new big bus garage facility, much larger, transit centers. So it's costing us all of us who live there. Now, I might add, maybe I shouldn't add it, but I will. There's a very interesting funding mechanism in Utah called the homestead exemption. Most states have a homestead exemption. It means that if you're a primary resident, if that's your primary residence, you have a certain little exemption, which is different than someone who's a second homeowner. Usually it's 5 or 10%. In Utah, it's 45%. So all of us, I see you all like shocked. But we can't get a drink in Utah. So, I mean, there's trade-offs, So, no, you not only can't get a drink in Park City, we have a brew pub at one end of the street and a distillery at the other. You can definitely get a drink there. But those of us who live there full-time, everyone gets their house assessed the same, but then we only pay 55% of the assessed value, whereas commercial and second homes, and we have 70% of all our units are second homes in Park City, pay 100%. So we're living off of all the people who are building these multi-zillion-dollar homes. So while people complain about that, it's also afforded us a tremendous tax base and a great lifestyle. So they're helping to pay for that transportation system as well, and our school system. So that's just one way, but we pay for it. I guess that's the object. And, I said that if you're not willing to pay for it yourself, why should you get money from the federal government? Why should you get money from the state government? It's something that you want to do. So you have to say that's important. A lot of people complain about it. A lot of the locals complain about paying for the transportation system. But we realize that 75% of all our revenue comes from tourists, and that's an amenity to them. And just like talk about walkable cities and all, it's been proven over and over again in urban planning that if you want to have a really exciting street, you should have a door every 25 feet. If you've ever walked down a place and you have a long blank facade, it's a dead end. People will turn around. I mean, there have been lots of studies on that. And the most exciting places, there's something different, a new store, a new opening, just about every 25 feet. Well, it's the same thing, with tourists in a way. I mean, they want to see that kind of thing there. You just have to encourage them to take the bus and to get out then and walk around, but then take the bus back. And if they have to put their hand in their pocket after, how much a tourist spends? I mean, I don't know if you've done studies. We figured that every tourist that comes to Park City is spending $500 per person per day, excluding airfare. I tell our people, if you see a family of 4 in the winter that's there to ski, get down and kiss their ski boots. Because and so if they have to take 50 cents out of their pocket, that's nickel and diming them. That's pissing them off. Why would you do that? So we don't. So I don't know. I mean, it's just something that we decided is important for our business.
Great. The next question, I think we'll start with you, Sarah, if that's okay. Sure. We have several questions on Lakeview Commons, and we've mentioned what a great success that is, and we're all very proud of that as a community, but it has brought more parking and traffic, and it's a little congested there. Mm-hmm. So the question is, do we need more parking? At what point is enough? How can we better manage that demand? Do we need to flow parking in a different direction? How does transit factor in? Could you speak to that?
Sure. I think this is the delicate balance that we were referring to earlier in the presentations. Both of our presenters is, how do we manage growth and encouraging density with providing appropriate parking, but not necessarily going overboard as well. Obviously, that's part of one of the reasons the city is looking and so encouraged and excited about our Harrison Avenue redevelopment project that we're working on right now to redevelop that commercial strip adjacent to Lakeview Commons, basically carry that vision from Lakeview Commons into the commercial area. We are looking at things like on-street parking throughout that area and creating some one-way streets to provide more parking opportunities there for business as well as for folks that are utilizing both the recreation and the business facilities. We're including the Class 1 bike trail, as I mentioned, behind the neighborhood, and that's really a strong encouragement to get the locals on bicycles, get folks on bicycles coming into this facility, coming into the commercial area and accessing Lakeview Commons, making that a more bike pedestrian friendly access point. Though I've been down to Lakeview Commons now nearly every weekend during the kind of past 3 weeks, and it's fantastic to see the bike racks completely full. They're being utilized. People are biking there. But there's just a high demand use on that facility, and I think that's wonderful. Are we there with all the parking requirements? I can't say we are, I can't say we aren't. I think we're in the planning phases. We're looking at ways we can, as I said, kind of address and provide some more on-street parking, as well as the water quality improvements that go along with that to try and get people off the dirt compacted shoulders and try and revegetate and stabilize our shoulders through that area. But it's certainly of high interest right now. If you listen to the council meetings, the presentations, the discussions going on, that is a high interest area, and keep an eye on it. I think it's going to continue to evolve, and I think it's exciting.
Great, thank you. We have a couple questions about trails and backcountry, and we don't have a representative from the Forest Service, but I'll throw this out to any member of the panel that might want to jump in. One question could actually go to you, Miles. You might have the place to start with this. We have a lot of dispersed recreation with limited parking. Do you have examples from other communities that provide access to trails without having big parking areas at every trailhead? And there was a specific question about how do we park for Talac, Freel, Flagpole Peak, some of the backcountry assets. So if anybody has any knowledge on that, you can jump in after Miles.
I don't have a solution for that. We're struggling with that. We call it the tragedy of success. You open a trail, you provide an access, especially in a neighborhood, and then it gets really successful, and people start parking up and down the street, and then the neighbors start to complain. And, then we put up signs, like you say, get rid of the signs, naked streets. We end up putting up signs, can't park here, can't park there, we'll kill you, all those kinds of things. And it's a horrible problem. And, what we've tried to do is steer people to a few of the places where we have provided facilities, parking areas and lights. And now we're talking about bathrooms, and then people start screaming, why do you need that? We're turning into Los Angeles or something. But let's face it, you invite people to use your facilities. I mean, you use the idea of the toilet in the living room. But would you invite someone to your house and not tell them where the bathroom is? So the neighbors have a right to complain because they're going in their backyards, So we haven't solved it. We're in the middle of it, and we're trying to steer people the right way. But I think as long as, it's a sign of the success that we're having with these things. It's far outstripped. We didn't think it would ever be this successful. We didn't think mountain biking. I was there at the beginnings of mountain biking in 1970, 71 in Crested Butte, Colorado, when the guys from Marin came over and we started riding mountain bikes, and we thought it was a joke. And one day, just a little story, but it's a true story. One day, we were having this race over to Aspen, and we used to push our bikes up a place called Pearl Pass and then down. And we saw at this one race, it was 1974, a whole bunch of Japanese guys in suits. And we said, who the hell are they? Well, they were Shimano family. And they took it seriously. And we didn't. And that's why I'm sitting here talking to you today instead of having an island somewhere.
That's great. Want to add to that, Steve? Thanks.
I understand, Miles, you can't always ask the federal government and the state governments for money, but 90% of the watershed of Lake Tahoe is either owned by the feds, the majority, 85%, and the other, 5-7% is state and or local agencies own some land too. So it is fair for us to ask for a contribution from those folks. But there's partnerships involved. All of our transit systems are funded in part by the private sector, including Blue Gaw on the South Shore, certainly TART on the North Shore. They have a unique opportunity on the North Shore where they use TOT money from Placer County that comes back through a local organization, the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association, and some of that money goes into the transit system, into TART. But the point of this story, and to pick up on the federal state land ownership. So this year we have a pilot program. You may have heard about it, but you know what happened on Highway 28 up on the east shore, south of Incline, and Sand Harbor and all the Forest Service beaches up there, totally popular. I mean, people are parking on the side of the road, on the sides of trees, on tops of rocks, and getting out with their coolers and kids and dogs and walking down to Sand Harbor, and it was becoming a nightmare. It was a very, very dangerous situation. And finally, all of the partners up there, the Highway Patrol, everybody said, we can't have this anymore. I mean, when there was fire, the fire trucks couldn't get through, ambulances couldn't get through, you would get stuck there, you'd get in a line behind people going into Sand Harbor, and you'd be there for a long, long time. It was terrible. And that's a beautiful part of Lake Tahoe. So they finally said, okay, enough of this. When Sand Harbor's full, we're not allowing people to walk in anymore. If you want to come down, you will go on a bus. And so now we have parking in Incline Village at the old elementary school and another couple places. And it's, you know, it's a public transit system, and people are riding. On the 4th of July, we rode over 1,000 people from Incline Village down to Sand Harbor during that day. So this is an opportunity where to get people to go to recreation sites, you say park over here and then take the bus to where you're going and take the bus back. And it's been a pretty big success, and we're looking at the numbers and we're seeing how we can improve it. Like to have parking a little closer to Sand Harbor. There's this nice old Ponderosa Ranch property there, it'd be great, but the guy that owns it, he's not too keen on it. But we'll have to work on that. So the point is that we have partnerships at the state and the federal level with local level, and we can provide better transit to get people where they want to recreate. People say, oh, they'll never take a bus. They got the cooler, they got the kids, they got the dog. I'm telling you, it's happening. They're taking it because they know that unless you get out there at 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning, you're not getting to Sand Harbor. So this is the way to go, and people are really enjoying it. And here in another week, a week from tomorrow, we're starting on the North Shore a water shuttle pilot program. So you'll be able to take a little water shuttle connecting from Homewood to Tahoe City Marina, to Garwoods. You can get wet woody, and you can get back without having to drive on the road, and then to go over to the Tahoe Vista Recreation Area. So little short water shuttle, but hey, we're back with transit, you know, public-private partnership. A lot of people worked hard to make it work, and people said, no, nobody's going to get on, nobody's going to do that. I don't think that's true. So we'll see this month how many people ride this summer. But we're providing people more options for getting to where they want to go that don't involve a car, at least for the entire trip. So
That's great. And that speaks to sort of step by step, that incremental progress. My friend Brenden.
It's Brian here. One other quick thing to add. I went with my family to Telluride last summer for a wedding, and one thing Telluride does is runs a free gondola like 16 hours of the day. I'm not sure how they pay for it. I'm sure it's, you probably know, Miles.
They have a resort city tax for the mountain village that's paid for it.
Okay, so that's another case of some wealthier homes that pay for this gondola. But it's amazing because in the summer they retrofit simple bike racks on it, and folks can take their mountain bikes to the top of the hill for free and ride their bikes down. They can go to the top and they can hike all day, and I think we have an incredible opportunity at Heavenly to do the same thing. I don't know how we would pay for that, but many of our visitors are staying right there. They can walk to that gondola very easily, and if they didn't have to pay that $25 or whatever it costs in the summer to go to the top, that's just enough where it's like, well, family of 4, that's too much money, I'm not going to go do that. If they could ride that for free, I think we could get them to spend some money at the top. They could have a beautiful hike, maybe mountain bike up there. It's not allowed now, but maybe in the future we could look at things like that. But there's an incredible opportunity there, I think, if we could look at that. Also, that Van Sickle State Park has a beautiful hiking trail that you can walk right from town and go all the way up to the rim trail and hike as far as you want, or ride your bike, and it's amazing.
It is amazing, and the Van Sickle State Park is by state, Nevada, California, a great new amenity, an urban trailhead for Tahoe. Bea, do you want to add?
I just have to add that we're starting a South Shore water taxi next week as well. So
Cool.
I don't have all the details. I know that the initial voyage of this ship or vehicle, vessel, whatever it is, I haven't seen it yet, is the evening of next Thursday night, I believe, as they open the new bistro on the pier. So that will be
terrific.
its maiden voyage, and then they'll start the next day. So, yeah.
Ah, exciting. So, see, things are happening. This is a good thing. Brendan, hold the microphone because I want to ask you the next question. And this will be for several members of the panel. How can we better align our transportation policy between all the jurisdictions? So, local jurisdictions, Caltrans, and other entities, if you want to take a stab at that. Because you touched on that earlier in your opening.
Yeah, I think we can always continue to do better and should strive to do better. And we really have been. Karen Fink is in the audience. She's an incredible transportation planner at TRPA that's spearheaded getting the bike ped master plan adopted. And I think that document really brought many of our agencies together. I know we worked with the city and Caltrans and even all the Nevada folks to come together and look at our network as a whole. You know, we have this gigantic hole in our town. We all kind of have to work around it. Many jurisdictions, and it is challenging here because you can't stop your bicycle ride or your walk on a political boundary. You know, you have to continue on, but the funding doesn't work that way. You know, we can only spend our money in El Dorado County. We stop at the city limits. So that's a challenge. In order to continue on, you really need to communicate, which is the key to all of life, I think. I'm convinced. Communication is the key to getting anything done. And it's a lot of hard, long meetings. Can be really boring. I hope I'm not boring you too much, so I'll pass the microphone on. He did. And some of the meetings are boring, and sometimes you want to bang your head on the table, but that doesn't mean that they're not important. But I think we have been doing a fantastic job. TRPA is really trying to spearhead this with their regional plan update and the new transportation plan. And I applaud Karen. I think she's done a tremendous job. And Ty, another man right here in the audience. Really.
Karen, give a wave.
I mean, they're really bringing us together. I don't know.
Sarah, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure, I would just echo what Brendan said, that I think it's really a cooperative effort, and I know that I think I talk to Caltrans daily, nearly, if not every other day, and I want to give them some credit also for the partnership that they've brought forward as part of these highway improvements. Caltrans is making a huge investment in this community right now. It's been a long time coming, and we're all very excited about it. And while it is a linear facility along a highway, I think it still will provide amazing connection to the existing network that is here in the city, and they're accommodating that through both Class 1 and Class 2 bike paths. And you know, I'd like to give an example of that bike trail I was talking about that has been in the planning effort for 10 years, the El Dorado Beach to Ski Run Boulevard bike trail. Caltrans, through the partnership with Caltrans, through identifying the complete streets needs in the community, they were able to deobligate some excess funding from the highway project that came in under budget to the city for constructing that path. And so it's those kinds of partnerships, it's identifying those kinds of opportunities for where we can share funding and where we can share resources to try and build things that I think that it's a long, slow haul, but that's how you construct it.
Great. Marlo, did you want to add too?
Thank you. And I'd just like to clarify that most of our major projects in the basin are actually stemming from water quality issues and treating the pollutant load that comes into the roadway. So while we try to look at what other features or types of things we can incorporate, our primary focus has to be on that because it's tied back to the dollars. And we really try to take these opportunities as they come along and see what we can implement or what we can work with other agencies. And I think some of the display boards in the back that TRPA has done actually illustrate this, because these are actually some of the gem projects in the basin. And at least on the California side, none of those have been done with one source of funding. It's been a collaborative effort, whether it's been state funding, local money, private money, as Steve has mentioned, regional funding, and people coming together to do things aside from geographic boundaries, even if it's within a municipality, and beyond right-of-way. And while we may have those constraints we need to work within, we all can work together to do, kind of back, I think, to what you were saying earlier, it's almost, when you look at complete streets and the great examples up on the slides, it's beyond the street. It's really about corridor planning and how you look at all those facets in a community.
And I just want to echo the investment because we work together on securing all these funds. And the Caltrans investment just from that state of California alone, around the whole California side of the basin, North Shore, South Shore, it's something like $400 to $500 million. Just the stretch between the Denny's and Ski Run is $40 million. I mean, this is not inexpensive stuff that we're talking about. We're not just putting a nice new, bit of pavement on the highway. Water, erosion control infrastructure is extremely expensive, and everything else that goes along with it. And we're really fortunate that we have that going on. That doesn't mean it's easy and that it's perfect, and we have a lot more work to do. But that's something that we can be proud of, that we've been able to bring that to bear. While you have the mic, Marlo, we have a question about highway speeds, and if you don't know the answer to this, we can certainly get back to whoever asked this question. But the question was, if we wanted to make Highway 50 25 miles an hour, could we possibly do that? And are there other communities that have had big highways, maybe Michael, that you could jump in on, that have lowered their speed limits and been successful or not successful? What steps could we take to do that?
Officially, right now, there are certain things in California statute that's California law about how speed limits are changed and how we can look at doing that and when we can do it. And it involves an engineering speed study and looking at the actual traffic volumes and the type of roadway and the speeds traffic is currently flowing. So it's not so much a discretionary thing. And if you really want to look at doing that under current law, it either involves changing what's happening now with traffic conditions. So if another study is done, you have a decrease in the speed, or somehow you get an exception to state law.
Okay. Michael, you want to jump in?
It's the classic chicken egg. Absolutely right. And just so you know, it has been resolved. The egg came first. But anyhow, biologically speaking, that's true. But anyhow, what Marlo said, Marlo, right? Yeah, it's absolutely correct. And it is a vexing problem because the way the question was framed is absolutely false. It's not about lowering the speed limit. It's about lowering the speeds. It's really what you're interested in, right? And 25 miles an hour is pretty amazing to get down to that speed. I think getting down to 30 would be quite an achievement, too. And you mentioned in the introduction that it was part of the team that helped develop the Main Street Handbook, and that was a really, really big issue. How do you get highway speeds to slow down when you go through a community? And the DOT had traffic engineers with the same kind of training as the engineers who work for Caltrans, and we did come up with some very, very reasonable compromises, I would like to say. And a really good example is Lincoln City on Highway 101 on the Oregon coast, not dissimilar to some of the problems that you face here. And that is, we looked at the total time that it takes for someone traveling a certain distance. Now, the thing about Highway 101 is about 470 miles in Oregon. No one travels the entire distance. Hardly anybody does. So we look at another corridor, which maybe you're more familiar with, Highway 97, and runs up and down the eastern side of the Cascade Mountains from Washington to the California border. That's about the same distance, about 430 miles, and that is a trucking route. And it goes through about 13 communities, Redmond, Bend, Sisters, not Sisters, but towns more or less the same size as South Lake Tahoe. We looked at what would the impact be on total travel time for those 430 miles if we slowed traffic down to 25 or 30 miles as it goes through all the communities. Does anyone want to guess the impact on travel time for that entire corridor? It was like 12 minutes. Yeah, so, an 18-hour trip, you're adding 12 minutes. We realize,
Wow.
Well, it's absolutely absurd to think about rushing traffic through town when that's all the time that it takes. So what we worked as, and I hate to use the word compromise because it's had such negative connotation, but compromise doesn't have to be negative, is we are more than willing to slow traffic down through the core area of the city down to really slow speeds if you work more closely with us with access management and reducing the linear sprawl that spreads out on each side of town. Because remember, if you showed you that picture of Redmond, which is on Highway 97, the core part of the downtown is only about a mile. The sprawl is about 3 or 4 miles on each end. So when people are crawling through 7 miles of sprawl at very slow speeds because of all the accesses, because of all the business, because of crashes occurring, that's what's really reducing your travel time. So again, looking at getting traffic to flow not necessarily faster, but more smoothly through the outskirts of the town, so reducing the impact of really bad access management and unbridled sprawl. And then we're much more willing to reduce the traffic speeds in the core of the town, which is the walkable, bikeable heart of the city.
Excellent.
And that has worked out pretty well for us in quite a few communities.
Terrific. Thank you.
Would you mind?
Please, please.
Speaking to the visual cues. like
Yeah, oh yeah,
on some
sorry,
of
yes,
the
absolutely, you're right, yeah.
It's one of those things where it may actually be off the highway.
Right, yeah. Thanks for reminding me of that, because we just gave a whole design, one-day design class where we talked a lot about visual cues, and I just realized we didn't do that this evening. Yeah, visual cues are so absolutely critical. Remember I showed you that street in Vancouver, British Columbia, that has no traffic engineering whatsoever, no speed signs, and yet people just know how to behave. And the slide that we like to use to illustrate that is, again, a state highway that comes into a small community, and Coburg, a town of about 3,000 on a state highway, and we totally redid the highway in that town. I got a picture that shows the approach, the rural cross-section, 2 lanes with fairly wide shoulders, open ditches and fields on either side, 55 miles an hour, and then the transition is quite abrupt to all of a sudden sidewalks, bike lanes, lightings, buildings at the back of walk and all that. And there's a speed limit sign, and we asked the question, is a speed limit sign necessary? And most people say, not really. There's all these visual cues that tell you to slow down. There's on-street parking, there's people, there's businesses, et cetera, et cetera. So that is how communities can work much more closely with the Department of Transportation on trying to get more reasonable speeds, is create the environment in which people are going to behave, and then lowering the speed limit is a lot easier to do, because I'm very familiar with the kind of statutes they have in California, because they're not different from other states. Just so you know, all states have the same laws, pretty much. They're not that different. And yeah, it is changing the environment first, not changing the speed limit.
Terrific. I want to get to your question, Ty, and we have a microphone if you could speak into it, so we can put you on YouTube. It's just for recording. You won't hear.
Well,
It doesn't echo.
actually, some time has passed since I first had that question. I'll ask that one, but I'd like to make another comment. So one of the problems that our community faces, and other tourist-based communities, is that we get evaluated on the population base. But our infrastructure is needing to accommodate 3 million people. So how do we match that out? How do we represent the real active use of our transportation needs to get money that's maybe a little more representative of the
You need
use?
the mic for that one. I can start with you. We can work down.
Great question, Ty, and that is the key question, and we're trying to come up with a formula right now that blends permanent population with second home ownership percentages and day use. But this is very controversial, because you say, well, Tahoe, yeah, you have visitors. Well, so does Monterey. So does Mendocino County. I mean, everybody has visitors. So it's difficult. We're really swimming upstream on this whole idea of blending. But our point back is, well, okay, we're come up with this population formula, and we've got one right now. So it basically shows a population, an infrastructure population for Tahoe, for transit, et cetera, transportation. I think we're somewhere in the 140 to 150,000, as opposed to our actual quote permanent population basin-wide of now closer to 50,000. So if we're able to put this in play, it would triple our transit investment and triple our state highway investments. But we're saying, okay, any community that has a compact mandate to reduce reliance on the private automobile can take advantage of the same formula. It isn't just exclusive to Tahoe. We happen to be a compact agency that has a mandate to reduce reliance on the private automobile. So if anybody else in California wants to step forward with that designation and that requirement, they can take advantage of this formula too. And so that's what we're trying to do in Sacramento. And some of the doors are hard to open, but I think we have a compelling message. I think we have a compelling need, and if we're being told that this is what we have to do, well, 90% public land ownership, somebody's got to help us with that, because we can't do it, as you correctly point out, on our permanent population alone.
And then just to indulge, one of the empty seats there is not being represented, and that's the advocacy point of view. So advocacy plays a huge role in this whole process. Mm-hmm. And it's the people sitting behind me, it's the people living in the community. They really need to step up and take a stand, rather than pointing fingers, but to do the heavy lifting and join with you, because it is going to take the political will of electing officials and city council, board of supervisors that have the commitment and the vision to sustainable, livable communities. So I just want to challenge the people sitting behind me and everyone else in this community to take a stand, to voice, and to join us to do the work. Because I think, here's a small percentage of agents of our community, but it's really the community that's going to make a difference. And we need to bring the humanity back to this process. And that humanity is the complete streets, a sustainable community. But it's going to take all of us to do that.
Well said.
Thank you. There you go, Katie. Thanks. We only have time for a couple more questions, but I did want to emphasize. I'm going to play up what Ty Pilastri is saying. And when I moved to Tahoe first, or almost 20 years ago, there wasn't a very active bike coalition. There wasn't an active, other than maybe some mountain biking, and TAMBA has been around. But I'm really proud of the work that the community has done to come together, to get involved, to show up at meetings like this, to show up at city council, to talk about bike racks at businesses and bike lanes. And that's what it takes. The more critical mass that we get, the more attention everyone pays. We have a lot of problems in our community to solve, but if we can coalesce around some really key themes, and biking and walking around town seems to be one of those key themes, the more progress that we'll make. So I just want to open it up to the audience. We've gone through most of our questions. If anybody has a last couple questions, Norma?
Michael, this question is for you. In your slide presentation, you showed there was like 4 lanes in the center lane, and you said we photoshopped this, and you said, well, I've had this slide for 15 years. We've been working with Portland DOT, and nothing has happened yet. That vision is a vision that has been shared by members of this community for a long time. So the question is, what are the problems that you are finding to make that vision a reality? And you mentioned specifically Portland DOT. So what were the issues there?
Right, on that particular segment of highway?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a very important vision for our community.
Right. It's interesting that we chose that as an example of what could be done to a highway, because it is what we like to call an orphan highway. And Caltrans may know what that means. It is a highway that no one wants. If you think of the mission of different departments of transportation, like, for example, city departments of transportation, they're really concerned about access and livability and how do people move around the city and how they can make streets vibrant places. That's what cities are looking at nowadays. Counties, if you really think about it, county transportation was more about farm to market, right? Getting the produce into town and things like that, and getting the mining and the lumber and the timber out from the resource extraction areas to the centers where it can be processed. That's pretty much the mission of county roads, right? And then state DOTs were set up for interregional and interstate traffic. Well, you have all what we call orphan highways, the highways that existed, that were created for a reason, that were either county or state DOT highways, and they really kind of fall off the radar screen as far as what purpose do they really serve. That section of highway that I showed you up there is kind of the ugly stepchild that no one wants. It's a commercial street. It's not really important regionally, so the counties don't want to do anything about it. From a DOT point of view, it's only 3 or 4 miles long. It doesn't really matter that much. So again, it gets back to a lot of these funding issues that you've been talking about now. From a funding perspective, no one's really willing to open up the pocketbooks and invest the kind of money that it would take to make a difference on that particular highway, even though the people who live on it, the people who work on it, the people who have retail really have dire needs, because it's a very dysfunctional highway. So it's getting back to how do you equitably distribute money in such a way that it does address needs. And one of the programs that I was very, very involved with the Oregon DOT was setting up programs based on safety and looking at accidents. And that particular section of highway has a horrendous crash rate, for example. So if you're smart about seeking funding, you go where the money is and you make that funding source fit your project. And that's one way that we can get after something like that, to just seek all the different funding sources that you can think of and try to make your project fit that funding source. It sounds kind of perverse. It shouldn't be that way. Don't get me wrong. It is kind of a perversion of the way that these programs are set up. So, don't lie about it. I'm not saying you should lie about it, but try to see what it is that you want to do, with that particular section of a roadway and see what kind of programs fit that vision.
Well, and to ask a follow-up question on that is, Highway 50, the way it was designed now, was based upon the vision back in the 70s that there was going to be a freeway going through the town. And the infrastructure is there. We have these huge right-of-ways, we have all these things here. So I was wondering, when you're talking about repurposing a street based upon the new vision for that community, what kind of discussions were had with a state Department of Transportation and aligning that vision and repurposing that street so that they would understand, no, it's not a freeway anymore. No, we don't want cars to just zoom by. We're creating communities here.
Right. And I think, again, I mean, I can't speak specifically for Caltrans mission statement, but if you look at most mission statements for state DOTs, it is about linking regions, about linking communities. So it's really about getting people to a community, and I think DOTs more and more willing to give up control of the section of the highway. It goes through a community, realizing we've done our job, we've brought you to the city limits, and we're doing a lot of horse trading. Like, for example, a very good example you might be familiar with is Ashland, Oregon. Highway 99 through Ashland, Oregon was very, very contentious. A lot of the issues that you're facing here in South Lake Tahoe, and the city kept coming up with their cross-section and their vision of the highway, and the DOT said, no, this is our vision of the highway. Till a lot of people were asking us, asking themselves, well, why are we holding off this vision for 99 through Ashland? We built I-5. That's carrying the through traffic. And so we turned the road over to the city. The city bought it from the DOT, and it's now their street, and they can do what they want with it. And I tell you, the ink, it's a metaphor anymore. Everything's electronic nowadays, but the ink was barely dry on the contract, and the city was out there making all the changes to the roadway that the DOT didn't want to accept. So I can't really speak for Caltrans and South Lake Tahoe, but Caltrans does have a mission to get people from the Sacramento Valley, and Nevada DOT does have a mission to get people over the mountains into this basin. But after that, we should be looking at, maybe is Caltrans willing to give up Highway 50 through South Lake Tahoe and turn control over to the city, as long as you do, of course, provide enough capacities for throughput traffic. Remember, throughput is only a small percentage of the traffic on Highway 50. I haven't done the studies, but based on everything that I know, it's probably around 15 or 20% of the traffic is only going through. And then I know there's talk about a bypass, for example. It's not going to relieve as much traffic as you hope from your downtown, because not that many people really want to avoid South Lake Tahoe.
I'm sensitive to everyone's time because we're running at our bewitching hour, but I just want to ask our panelists if there were any other comments that any of you wanted to share that we didn't get to through a question. Feel free to have any closing words. Are we good?
Yeah, I go on.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Expert.
Well, I just have a comment because I'm fortunate in my career. I get to speak at a lot of resorts. I'm called in a lot of resorts around the world, and there are places I go that you walk out and they're basket cases. I mean, they're just hopeless. And I always considered Lake Tahoe to be kind of the Balkans of the resort business, because you have the 2 states and 5 counties and towns, and you like to sue each other more than talk to each other and things like that. So, but I go home now scared, quite frankly, because it's sort of like that sign, like you look in the mirror in your car and it says the objects are closer than they appear, and you're getting your stuff together here, and I'm going to go home and tell our people, you're getting your stuff together here, and we better come back here and see what you're doing, because I'm worried now about the competition that you're going to provide us. I can tell you one thing that we're never going to have in Park City. That's a water taxi. I mean, you got that one on us, and that's pretty impressive. But from what I've heard over the last 3 days, it's just amazing to me the progress that you've made. As I said, I've been here 8 times over 25 years, and I've just never heard this kind of progress and sort of cooperation. And I hope it keeps up. I mean, it's just amazing, because you deserve it here. Really, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Miles. Anybody else want to say anything before we go? Okay. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. On behalf of TRPA's governing board and staff, thank you all for being here tonight. And we'll be here for one-on-one questions if you need us. Thanks.